Hello there, this is Alexandr from Sinesquares.net, and today we're going to do a long-awaited video comparing the OP-1 field and the OP-XY by Teenage Engineering. Before we start, you can see I have some cases on. These are the leather cases by Mask. Mask is making incredible cases and deck savers for any gear. They make for pedals, they make for synthesizers, and they're high quality and very, very affordable. And as you can see, you can just remove them. And they also have Velcros to match the OP-1 and the OP-1 field, so you can stick them into that. And another cool thing that they're making are these deck savers that you can put on top of your gear and protect them from dust. They fit perfectly, as you can see. So when you're done using your OP-1 or your XY, you can just leave that on so no dust is going into your precious synthesizers. So thank you to Mask for sending me this over. I'm really happy with the quality, and for the price I think you should definitely get some for your studio, for your pedals, or for your synthesizers. And let's just open those up and start the comparison. After the OP-XY was released, the number one question is, how does this compare to the OP-1 field? And that makes total sense because they look almost the same and they actually have more similarities than differences. However, the few differences they have completely set them apart. I'm not planning to get super technical today and discuss every little difference, but instead we're mostly going to focus to the core workflow differences that they have and help you decide which one is best for you. Also, we're going to discuss about the power of having both devices, which is quite cool, to be honest. By the way, I have videos both for the OP-1 field and the OP-XY, so feel free to check them out. I'll put some links right here. And now let's open these things up and start discussing about the workflow and their differences. So both the OP-1 field and the OP-XY are synthesizers. They're also samplers for drum sounds and synth sounds. They have effects, and they're essentially a DAW in hardware form. And that DAW side is probably their biggest difference. So in terms of design, both devices look pretty much identical. Their main difference is that the OP-1 field has bigger keys and the OP-XY has this sequencer strip right here. Other than that, they're pretty much the same, and most buttons do the exact same thing on both devices. I've got to say that playing the keys on the OP-1 field feels much better than on the OP-XY. You have bigger keys, and they feel better. I mean, they have some kind of padding, while the keys on the OP-XY are more clicky. But they're both like mini synthesizers, so you're not expecting to have full-size keys or even mini keys. In terms of connectivity, both devices have an audio in and an audio out, which is stereo, but the OP-XY also has like a multi-out port that can do so much stuff. So in terms of connectivity with other gear, the OP-XY is much more capable. Now let's talk about the synth engines. The synth engines are completely different and unique to each device. They both have lots of them and you can create a wide palette of sounds, but if I had to compare them, I would say that the OP-XY has more standard synth engines, while the OP-1 field has a bit more experimental ones. So on the OPXY you can find synth engines like the piano or the organ, which are kind of standard. The OP-1 field has Dimension, which is a standard subtractive synth, and they both have some weirder and more experimental synth engines, but they're both very capable and versatile, and you can create so many sounds with them. So I wouldn't say that the synth engines are a deciding factor to choose one over the other one. In terms of samplers, they both have a drum sampler and a synth sampler, but the OPXY has more capable samplers because you can have multi-sampled instruments for the synth sampler, which is kind of great, and single one-shot samples and create kits, and that is something that you cannot do on the OP-1 field. You have to sample like a full loop and then chop your samples. So I would say for samplers, the OPXY has a slight advantage. Now let's talk about the effects. When it comes to effects, you will find a big difference, not only in the options you have, but also in the way they implemented them. The OPXY does not have an effects slot per preset like the OP-1 field, but it does have 2 effects sends. So all your tracks share these 2 effects. You can have chorus, delay, distortion, a lo-fi effect, a phaser, and a reverb, and all your tracks share those effects, and you can send different amounts of them to these 2 effects, just like you would do in a regular mixer when you have your 2 aux sends. While on the OP-1, each preset has its own effects slot. It's number 3, and you have a few effects that you can choose. Plus, the effects on the OP-1 field have more controls. You have 4 controls for each effect. I think that the effects on the OP-1 field play a huge part on how the OP-1 sounds, and they have much more character than the ones on the OPXY. On the other hand, on the OPXY, you also have your aux tracks, where you have your punching effects that can completely transform your sequence, but they're not like actual effects. They're pretty much MIDI effects for your drum parts and for your synth parts. The equivalent of that for the OP-1 field would probably be the effects you have for the tape. You have like tape stop, a reverse, and the 2 macros that you can map, for example, to the master effects you have for your output. On the OP-1 field, they're a bit more limited, while the punching effects on the OPXY are so fun to use, and they can completely change your sequences and your sounds. I really like the punching effects compared to the few macros you have on the OP-1 field. Also, while it's not an effect, the OPXY has something I've been asking for the OP-1 field, and that is a dedicated filter per preset. You can find that on page 3. Every sound you save here has its own filter, and you can also use a filter envelope for that filter, and that makes your life so much easier. On the OP-1 field, you have the nitro, which is an effect, and it is essentially a filter, and you can access it here. But now you have to waste your 1 effect slot just for the filter. I think the way they implemented it on the OPXY is much more convenient, and I wish they could do that on the OP-1 field. And now let's talk about the sequencer. Now it's the time where these 2 devices start to drift apart from each other. While the OP-1 has multiple sequencers, the OPXY just have this one massive, incredible sequencer that is much better than any of the sequencers the OP-1 field has. The sequencers on the OP-1 field are quite useful. You have, for example, the endless sequencer, which is my favorite. You have a great arpeggiator, you have endless, you have finger, which is for melodies and for drum tracks. You have your simple hold, the pattern sequencer, which is kind of a step sequencer like in your DAW. Sketch, which I never use, it's quite hard to use. And lastly, you have Tombola, which is like a generative sequencer where you put notes. Many of the sequencers of the OP-1 field are kind of gimmicky after a while. For example, Tombola is something that everyone loves when they get the OP-1 field, and after a while you never use it. While the OPXY has this incredible sequencer, which is a step sequencer. You can live record, you have step components that alter your sequences, and it's something that most of us are kind of familiar with, and it's very easy to use and create complex stuff. And now we're going to the biggest difference, which is the tape versus the arrangement mode. This is the biggest difference between those devices and the thing that makes them unique. On the OP-1 you have the tape where you can record 4 tracks, 1, 2, 3, and 4, while on the OP-XY you have these 8 tracks, 1 for each of your presets. And the big change is that the OP-1 field records audio while the OP-XY records MIDI, and that changes everything on how you're using each device. I think that the tape, which uses audio versus the sequencer and the MIDI tracks on the XY, is the difference that defines the audience for each of these two devices. To create a song or just flesh out an idea, on the OP-1 field you have to use audio, copy and paste stuff, which can become kind of difficult and tiring, while on the OP-XY you can create tons of different sequences and then arrange them, and then use the song mode to arrange them into a song structure. Especially if you're an Ableton Live user, the OP-XY feels like home. It's much more intuitive to you because they have pretty much the same workflow. You first create your sequences, you arrange them to a scene, and then arrange those scenes into a song, just like you're doing in Ableton Live. I truly think that the OP-XY is the best hardware implementation of a DAW. It's intuitive and easy to understand, it's very fast, it's easy to edit stuff, and it comes on a very portable package like the OP-XY with many sounds, many synthesizers inside of this thing. So yeah, I think it's the best hardware DAW you can find out there. And now let's talk about the overall philosophy and workflow on each device, which I think is the way to decide which one to get. Teenage Engineering clearly tried to make a portable 4-track recorder and a portable DAW with these two devices, and I think they kinda nailed it. The OP-1 field is a modern 4-track tape machine with all the instruments and effects built in, while the OP-XY is, as we said, the best portable DAW you can find. If you ever work with an actual 4-track recorder and then you use the OP-1 field, you can clearly see the vision and the way they recreated a digital 4-track. You can only record audio, you have to cut and then paste stuff, just like creating splices with tape. And it also comes with all the problems that an actual tape recorder comes with. You cannot undo. If you mess up a recording, you have to delete and re-record it, and you have to overdub like a lot because you have only 4 tracks. On the OP-XY you have full flexibility and a much more structured workflow. So in this time and age where most producers are very familiar with DAW, the OP-XY feels easier to grasp, easier to understand and work with, while the OP-1 takes you to a completely different workflow and a completely different approach than the one you're used to. And that might look like a bad thing, but it can also become a very good thing. So if you had to choose one over the other one, I would do it like this. If you're a producer who likes to work with sequencers, who likes to create loops, I would go for the OP-XY. If you're used to working in the DAW and making scenes and a lot of loops that you can edit, the OP-XY is a much better choice because the workflow is just that, and you won't have all the frustrations of the tape functions of the OP-1 field. On the other hand, if you're more of a singer-songwriter type of artist, I think that the OP-1 field is a better fit for you. You can quickly record your ideas, you can record instruments and even vocals directly on the OP-1 field. For example, you can set up 2 mics and just play the guitar and sing and record a whole track on the OP-1, and that is something that you cannot really do on the OP-XY. And I think that the linear timeline that the OP-1 field has is something that a lot of artists find easier to understand and easier to work with. So if that's you, the OP-1 field is the right choice for you. But what if you're someone in between these two different personas? Well, that would be a bit tricky to answer, but I think it all comes down to what you want to do with your instruments, because this device has its own strengths and weaknesses, and it's all about your unique workflow and how you can elevate that workflow using a hardware instrument. For example, if you're looking for a device to record stuff and mangle audio and play with it, the OP-1 Field is a better choice. If you like to create a lot of loops and ideas, maybe the OPXY is a better fit for you. In general, I think that the OP-1 Field is a bit more creative and experimental, while the OPXY, I think it's a bit more structured and easy to work with. It's kind of a workhorse in your studio. You can use it for so many things. And if you want to get the job done, I think that the OPXY is a better instrument, while the OP-1 Field is a bit more loose and a bit more creative. To narrow it down, I think that for most people, like 9 out of 10 producers, the OPXY is a better fit. It has a lot of things that the OP-1 has, and it's easier to work with. However, we do have to talk about the prices. The OPXY costs 2,299 euros, while the official price of the OP-1 Field is 1999 euros right now. And in that case, with just 300 euros difference, I think that you can easily compare those two devices and decide which one is best for you. But recently, Teenage Engineering has this discount program where you can choose your own price. And for the first 2 months, in June and July 2025, if you're watching from the future, they allowed you to buy an OP-1 Field for up to $13.99, up to $99.99, almost $10K for an OP-1 Field, which I think no one did. So if the new price of the OP-1 Field comes down to $1,400 versus $2,300 for the OPXY, then would be a completely different case comparing these two devices, because we're talking about like 900 euros difference. So in that case, there would be like in different price tiers. You cannot really compare a 2,300 device with a 1,400 device. There are a lot of people that cannot pay the price of the OPXY, but they might be able to afford an OP-1 Field. I have no official information from Teenage Engineering about a new price for the OP-1 Field, so for now, we'll just have to compare them with the official prices, which is 2K for the OP-1 Field and 2.3K for the OPXY. And at this price point, I think the 300 euros difference is not something that is going to hold you back from buying the one you want. And lastly, what about having both devices? I'm sure some of you are gonna comment and gonna be so pissed that I'm talking about a 4,300 euro setup, but bear with me. I know it's expensive, but if you can afford these two devices and have both devices, I think they make a power combo for music production on the go and in the studio. So I'm gonna briefly talk about the advantages of having both of them. When Teenage Engineering started this Field system product line, I think that's exactly what they had in mind, having like the OP-1 Field, the OPXY, which is not a Field product, but yeah, it's like Field product, I guess. And they also have the CM15, which is a great microphone, and the TX6, which is a mixer that runs on batteries and it's tiny. And they also have the TP7, which is like a field recorder, but we're not going to talk about this for now. Having the OP-1 Field, the OPXY, a microphone, and a mixer, which is also an audio interface, is the ultimate portable studio setup. You're going to have an abundance of synth engines, drum samplers, synth samplers, multi-sample instruments, numerous ways to record external gear, and 2 ways to arrange your music. The workflow I tried and works perfectly is the following. I usually start with the OPXY because I find it more comfortable to work, and I start developing ideas, and then I just start having like a structure of a song, creating scenes, arranging them, and starting to have like a final idea of a song. And then what I'm doing is that I'm using the OP-1 Field as a recorder, so I'm using like one track of the OP-1 Field to record my arrangement on the OPXY. So now I'm moving to the OP-1 Field and I have one track out of the 4 tracks that I have available with my initial idea and my initial song structure. Then I can just record vocals, I can record external instruments like an acoustic guitar or something on the other tracks on the OP-1 Field and start developing the idea even more. So essentially the OP-1 Field works like a summing mixer for all my tracks on the OPXY. I might even use 2 tracks from the OP-1 Field to record stuff from the OPXY and then have 2 more spare tape tracks for adding instruments from the OP-1 or from a studio or from a microphone. And I think that this workflow and this setup gives you so much flexibility and so much room to create a track. You have too many instruments to work with, too many options to record stuff, and you have the tracks available to do that. If you practice with this setup, you will immediately understand how much power you have in your hands. And the best part is that you just have two tiny devices that you can carry around anywhere with you and have incredible battery life. Both of them are capable of producing numerous sounds, and when you add samples, either drums or like synth samples, the sky's the limit. I mean, you have so many different sounds to work with. Hopefully in the future I'm gonna add the TX6 to this setup and maybe a mic, probably the CM15, and mess around with this setup, which is so powerful and so cool to be able to work anywhere you are without having to move around all these things that I have in here, which is kind of impossible to do. So yeah, I think that the portable studio dream of teenage engineering has come to life. And now we have all the instruments and all the tools to actually have a portable studio. So that was it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like or subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you on the next one. Love ya.